Mr. Mayor, okay.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
And we're live.
Thank you. I declare the meeting of the City Council open. This meeting is conducted remotely in accordance with the coronavirus regulations and remote meetings protocol agreed by the Cabinet, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open, transparent manner. I would remind you, members, that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking to ensure there's no unnecessary background noise and help with the audio and visual quality of the broadcast. The Council's standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during this virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Can I also remind members to ensure that their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so. And remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. For the benefit of everyone watching on live stream, when I invite members to cast their votes on any particular item, they will do so electronically by using the voting facility and the chat room function. These votes will be automatically counted and recorded on the system, but individual votes are not identified on the screen, and the chat room poll is not available on the live stream for public viewing. However, I will announce the numbers of votes cast for and against and any abstentions before I declare the results. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for the public viewing as soon as possible after this meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon the request. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. Item 1, apologies. Anne?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Graham Berry.
Apologies from Councillor Graham Berry. Are there any other apologies that need to be recorded? Then please write those names in the chat box and they will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you. Part 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at this stage? If any declarations of interest arise during the course of the meeting, then members should draw this to my attention by using the hand raised facility or posting a message in the chat box. Part 3. The only announcement I have to make is the staff of the council and the officers have been really tremendous in these difficult times, and I'd like to thank them very much for the work they're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Item 2. The minutes from 24th of November 2020 are before us. Are there any points of accuracy?
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Councillor Val Dudley was in attendance at the previous meeting, and there's also a point, I'm afraid I haven't got the page number, but it was at the end just before the recorded votes on the part 2 item, where the minutes say, after lengthy discussion by all parties on the matter, Councillor Mayor moved a closure motion, and proposing an amendment during the debate, Councillor Mayor moved a closure motion.
Yes. Well,
we'll make those corrections, Mr. Mayor. If there is contest.
Yes. Thank you. That's right. I will move the minutes as a true record. Is that a seconder?
Yeah, I second it. Councillor John Guy. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll move the minutes as a true record. Oh, I've done that. Okay, sorry. Right. Was all those in favour, please indicate by clicking on the voting application in the chat box. I will give all members.
The voting application isn't working, Mr. Mayor, so if any member is opposed, perhaps they could just indicate by exception. Otherwise, we'll assume that they've agreed the minutes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor, sorry for butting in. I've just had a message. Councillor Kate Thomas wanted to ask a question, but nothing came up.
Sorry, was that on the minutes?
No, it wasn't. That was on another matter. Sorry, Deb and Jane. That was referring to something else completely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item 3, excuse me, item 3. Councillor Harvey should introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The minutes of the appointments are in the minutes pack, but there is a mistake in the one, Newport High School. It's not Maddie Cameron, it's Councillor Paul Cockram. And in addition, there's Very High, Gaynor Edwards, High Cross Primary, Caitlin Woodland, Fair Oak Nursery, Emma Garland, Maindy Primary, Maddie Cameron, and Newport High, Councillor Janet Cleverly. I'll put all of those in an email and I'll forward it across to Anne Jenkins. I also wish to ask for dispensation for Councillor Margaret Cornelius. She's not very well at the moment, and I would like because she's coming to a 6 months of missed meetings. I just want to make sure that she has dispensation. Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. We'll take those as two as the one. Could you ask if Councillor Fairweather could second what I said? Second the motion, please.
Yes, I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll count that as carried, okay?
Well, if you invite anyone who's opposed to
would anybody like to speak on that, please? Thank you. No? Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was my phone going off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. It's therefore duly carried. Okay. Item 4, police issues. Well, we haven't got any police to come with us, have we? So, do you see, Andy, is there any briefing notes that you're going to give us so we know what's going on?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, the Chief Exec, I've just had a message from Mike again to say that they're continuously trying to join. I have tried to also contact the Chief Superintendent today, so we will have briefing notes circulated, but we will have to ensure that there is a police presence at the next full council meeting, because clearly there are questions the members want. So I will pick that up with the Chief Superintendent this week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I was hoping the police were going to be there, but I understand the issue. But there is a worrying report that was published by Wales Online only 3 days ago or thereabout about the stop and search numbers in Newport, and it highlighted quite high figures. For example, my own ward came top. I know the police are not there and I cannot ask them, but can I just perhaps have minuted that this is of concern to me as a ward member, and that I would like to be able to put it again at the next meeting, be it as it may. It would be about a month from now. I should imagine that should be okay under police matters.
Yeah,
Okay, Anne,
Mr.
please.
Mayor, if Councillor Al-Nawami wants to write to the Chief Superintendent, he's quite easily can do that via email, and they can have a conversation, and then we'll just bring it all back at the next full council.
Fine.
Yes, that's what I'm going to say. You can
Yeah,
bring it
thank
next
you,
full
Deputy.
council.
We know the name of the superintendent, please.
Mike Richards, I'll send you his email across, Dad.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Right, item 5, notice of motion. Questions to the leader of the council. Leader of the council. Councillor Routley is going to introduce an item and formally move the motion. Bill?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We seek to amend Standing Orders 4.2b from 50 minutes time limit for Leader of the Council questions to 30 minutes. This change addresses the very recent issue of opposition leaders being timed out and unable to ask their questions. This administration and this council indeed prides itself in being known as the city of democracy. This city and democracy itself was built upon the efforts of the Chartist uprising, and it was from that Chartist uprising that we have modern day democracy, not just here in Newport, but right throughout the United Kingdom. I say to members, do not fear democracy. We should not place a time limit on scrutiny, for if you do that, you are putting democracy in chains. What we're asking for today is your support to loosening the chains. Our ancestors fought here in Newport. Our public demand scrutiny of the leader of the council, whoever they may be. We are fighting today to loosen those chains of democracy. Some people may say, Mr. Mayor, we do not go far enough. I say this, we must try and try better. For every elected member of the opposition, leaders have a right to be heard. They have a right to be heard and understood on behalf of the electorate that they represent. And indeed, every member of the council would have a right to be heard. It's the only place we can get realistic questions asked. This is why we're asking for the expansion. I can't believe I'm really arguing for an extra 15 minutes, no more, no less at this stage. 15 minutes. Come on, democracy deserves this. Newport deserves this. We need better scrutiny, and especially in this time of COVID, we need to be able to hold this administration to account and any administration to account. We can only do that by democratic scrutiny. So I say, please do not fear democracy. Do not chain it and gag it. Please support this motion before us today. And please, let's re-establish a more vibrant, democratic Newport. I so move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Matthew Evans, do you second the motion?
I'd like to formally second the motion, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak later in the debate.
Thank you. Does any member wish to propose an amendment?
Councillor Marshall, I propose an amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Gareth?
Yes, Councillor Marshall needs to propose his amendment, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps he could read it out.
Yeah, we do it, please.
Yes, I will show it in the chat box for members also. So you should be able to see it, members, and I will switch my camera on. So the proposed amendment, Chair, is to amend the motion in item 5 as follows. In line 1, before to amend, insert as follows. This council believes the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 will affect the way that we as a council operate. This council further believes that the council is committed to improving democracy and believes that any changes must be scrutinised within the terms of reference by the Democratic Services Committee, that this is an opportune time to review the proposed Standing Order 4.2b within the context of the introduction of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act of 2021 and existing procedures included in the Newport City Council Remote Meeting Attendance Protocol. And last, this council resolves that the Democratic Services Committee review both the impacts of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act of 2021 and any proposed changes to the standing orders together in line with the work plan of the said committee within the normal reporting to full council. That is the amendment, Chair.
Is there a seconder for the amendment?
I'll second that. Mr. Mayor, it's seconded by Councillor Jason Hughes.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Does Councillor Hughes wish to speak, Mr. Mayor, or reserve the right to speak later?
Councillor Hughes, please.
If I can reserve my right to the end, Mayor.
Are there any comments on the amendment?
Yes.
Excuse me, you're all talking, please. Could just one person talk, please? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chris Evans, Mr. Mayor.
Chris Evans. I said Councillor Evans, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, on the premise of the first question, I mean, it was deeply flawed with the First Amendment because it said that leaders of the opposition weren't allowed to ask questions. That wasn't the case. Every leader for the term of this council has been able to ask questions.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order, Mr. Mayor. In the meeting before November, Carmel Townsend, the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, was ruled out of time. There was no time for her to answer the question. I suppose, in fairness to Councillor Evans, if he had been there, he would have recognised that.
Mr. Mayor, this is not a point of order. No. Councillor Routley will have a right of reply at the end, but this is not a procedural point.
Yeah, would you let Councillor Chris Evans carry on, please, Councillor Routley? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Routley. So everybody is given the opportunity. The problem, and also, let's remember that the reason why we have questions to the leader is because by working constructively, it was actually the independents that suggested it, and it was embraced by the previous leader. The time to ask questions is obviously yes to the leader, but for members, but also at scrutiny. And it would help if some members actually knew the remits of the scrutiny they were actually on. I mean, that would be a great advance, and actually knew what questions to ask the scrutiny, or even turn up, as Mr. Routley says, as Councillor Routley said. I mean, this is a missed opportunity, and it's the original motion was lazy, and that's why I'm supporting the amendment, because there's an opportunity here to look at questions from the public. There's an opportunity here to look at proportional representation. There's an opportunity here to look at an elected mayor. So the actual motion is lazy, and in my opinion, political point scoring. The amendment is far more worthy. Members on the Democratic Service Committee should be using that committee to suggest things moving forward. That's why I'll support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Chris Evans. Anybody else like to join the debate, please?
Councillor Whitehead is indicated in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Whitehead, please. Would you start?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Salient points in both, actually. For me, you know, we are supposed to be the hotbed of democracy. I mean, past leaders have alluded to the fact we are the city of democracy. So I don't think it's a bad call at all to extend the time for questions to leader. I'm very mindful that it can become cynical, whereby people just will make points to keep the leader there for ridiculous amounts of time. I know that have happened historically. We don't want to go back down that road. But for me, it does make sense that, you know, that the leaders do get their questions to the leader, but it'd also be nice to hear the voice of others. And I also feel that the general public themselves, they like to see demonstrative democracy. So it isn't a bad thing. But and I also allude to Councillor Marshall's amendment, which I thoroughly agree with. There is a place for this, and it probably lies with democratic services. I mean, we should be shown to be in fully democratic, and hopefully, if we're all willing, there's an answer there, and there's a satisfactory outcome. Yeah, we don't want to waste time with hot air. So I do believe we can formulate a system through the democratic services where we can extend that period of time, and also that we don't want to be labouring the points in silliness and whatnot. But yes, it is a good call for democracy, and I do support Councillor Marshall's amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else like to comment, please?
Councillor John Watkins, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Joan Watkins, please.
I'd like to speak to the original motion, and in terms of democracy, I don't see it with this 15-minute slot which is allocated. It barely gives time for the leaders to ask a question, the opposition, or to ask their questions of the leader. And I do agree with Councillor Whitehead when he says they should not be the only voices that are heard. There should be an opportunity also for the opposition members to ask questions. I'll probably bore you all to tears by saying this, but in a previous life, I did experience a situation where questions to the leader were afforded a half-hour slot, and they were all afforded to members of the opposition. That to me is a true sign of democracy. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I come in a sec, please? Gareth, can you please clarify what we're debating, because there's a motion and there's an amendment to the motion, so
the debate. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor. The debate is on the amendment. So if the amendment fails, we will have a further debate on the substantive motion. So just for clarity, we're debating Councillor Marshall's amendment at the moment, which is effectively the matters referred back to Democratic Services Committee.
Mr. Mayor, procedural motion, can I speak on the proposed amendment, because I've spoken about the wording, but I've not actually given my speech yet in the proposal.
Councillor Marshall will have the right to reply at the end, Mr. Mayor, just before Councillor Oakley.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, yeah. Councillor David Williams. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I'll get my picture up as well. Just to say, I've put it in the chat box. There's no particular reason why we can't just increase the time by quarter an hour and refer it to Democratic Services, because we're just dancing round and round in there's little. I understand what Councillor Marshall has said. It's a very good idea, so that we look at where we're going with it. But why don't we just take a little bit of a risk and extend the time for quarter an hour? You know, it's not a big deal. So why don't we just get on with it and not find a way to make it work, not find a way not to make it work? Thank you.
I agree.
Councillor Ray Mogford.
I think that's been retracted, Mr. Mayor.
No, I'm back in. I was a bit confused about what I was going to say, bearing in mind that there's a new motion. Well, I think that this issue is long overdue, this whole process. However it's dealt with, whether it's through Democratic Services or whether it's through an agreement that we add 15 minutes, this whole process is long overdue. So I applaud Councillor Routley for raising this motion, irrespective of the outcome, and I guess we can guess the outcome. What this will do is ensure that this goes forward and we get to a point where we can ask more questions of the leader in council. If you look at the order in which questions are asked, they come in from the leader of the opposition party, the main opposition party, and then the independents, and then the Lib Dems. If you then look at the next question, it's for the ruling party. So question number 4 is for the ruling party. Question number 5 could be any of the 3 opposition parties. So Councillor Chris Evans talking about it being an opportunity to be disruptive or mischievous, it doesn't really apply, and I think that was unfair. So the motion and both motions are well-meaning, and it's about time we had this discussion. Thank you.
Baroness Debbie Wilcox of Newport, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask Councillor Watkins to turn off her camera, please? And Councillor Mogford, thank you. It should just be yourself and the principal speaker. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very glad to have the Transporter Bridge as our new background, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to the leader and the team for obtaining 8.75 million from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Fantastic news for the city. And thanks to Councillor Chris Evans for, in fact, reminding me of that bear pit of a meeting that took place running up to the 2017 elections, when I did agree to a leader's question. In fact, being the only council in Wales, I think, doing that at the time. Chris put me on the spot, and as ever, we rise to the occasion. I am speaking in support of the motion, Mr. Mayor, sorry, in support of the amendment to the motion, I beg your pardon, and referring to the local government bill, as noted in the motion. This bill is going to deliver a major package of reforms. It's going to include electoral reform, a general power of competence, which is long overdue for councils, and more consistent and coherent collaboration and joint working. And that means perhaps voluntary mergers, but more importantly, increasing public participation in local government. The bill contains proposals aimed at reforming and strengthening local government accountability and performance, so that we can continue to deliver modern, accessible, high quality public services for and with the community of Newport. And the provisions in the bill, Mr. Mayor, will move councils further towards openness and increased transparency. And it is absolutely right in this amendment to wait until we have the full merit of this bill in operation, and then we can look accordingly at the democratic functions. And to pick up another point as I close of Councillor Chris Evans, there are plenty of opportunities to raise issues, questions, accountability in the processes that already exist in the council, and I would urge all members to make much more use of the processes that already exist. I'm firmly in favour of the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Baroness Wilcox. Councillor David Farweller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will speak to the amendment. I see the merit of it. I think there's a lot of change coming our way with local government and what's happening. I think it probably would be sensible to have a proper debate within the Democratic Services Committee so that we can make an informed decision. However, I do feel that it would be a gesture if the council would agree to extend the time limit by 15 minutes until we have that meeting in the Democratic Services Committee. I don't see a problem with that. I think that would be a sensible solution and would meet everybody's needs here today at this council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Farweller. Councillor Hyatt Rahman, please. Councillor Hyatt. Hello?
If we move to Councillor Matthew Evans, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
and we'll check whether Councillor Hyatt is connected properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matthew Evans.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a problem with the additional amendments which are being proposed, but I do think it's rather sad and disappointing that we can't agree today for the extra 15 minutes. I mean, what are people worried about with 15 minutes? This would have been an ideal opportunity, for instance, to talk about the council's response to Debenhams or to the flooding or to the snow. Bearing in mind, I think when I was leader of the council, sometimes I was speaking for up to 2 hours, and the members of opposition, then Labour Party, were absolutely delighted. And the thought of having that not debated at the time they would have been up in arms. So, I mean, we're talking about an extra 15 minutes. So I've got no objections to the amendments at all, but surely you can't be concerned about it. The amount of people who have been unable to speak today, for instance, and bearing in mind we have less council meetings than we used to, you're talking about what, maybe one backbencher, and don't forget this will be for all backbenchers. Be able to share the good news about Transporter Bridge, Heritage Lottery funding. So I really don't see why. I'm loath to propose an additional amendment to the amendment, but I would hope that the Labour Party will accept the 15 minutes and we can move forward with the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Matthew Evans. Councillor Yvonne Forsey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to comment that as a backbencher, I've had the privilege to ask several questions over the past few years, and therefore that means that by the time I get to ask a question, the leaders of all of the three opposition parties have already asked their questions and had their answers. So I think, plenty of questions have been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall, please.
Do I have the right to sum up, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you do. But
Councillor Hyatt has sorted his audio problems out, Mr. Mayor, or whether he wants to speak. Councillor Hyatt.
Councillor Hyatt, would you like to speak, please?
Mr. Mayor, can I sum up before we go to the amendment?
Mr. Mayor,
Gareth, we're still on the. Sorry, Councillor Oakley, we're still on the amendment.
Yeah.
As far as I understand it, Gareth, can you advise, please?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, sorry, if Councillor Hyatt is still unable to join us and make his comments, then we've got a number of speakers before Councillor Oakley.
Yes, I did understand that. Yes. Councillor Marshall.
Well, no, Councillor Marshall will come after Councillor Hughes. Councillor Hughes has seconded the amendment and reserved his right to speak. So in order, we're looking at Councillor Hughes first. Councillor Marshall will have the right to sum up as the mover of the amendment, but then Councillor Routley will have a right of reply as the mover of the original motion. So if we deal with Councillor Hughes first.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can just remind members that if necessary and if time runs out, the leaders are afforded the opportunity to have a written response to the leader of the council. I'd like to second this amendment, and while I fully understand the need to always explore ways of improving democracy within our city, and Newport has a deep richness of improving democracy in the country, a direct motion to council may not always afford the desired effect. Previous improvements have been submitted in the form of fully researched and scrutinised reports from committee to members in full council. The reason for this is to maximise the impact so that we fully understand the consequences of motions on the workings of the council. I therefore wish to support my colleague by seconding this amendment, and that we refer the order through the appropriate committees, and in this case the Democratic Services Committee, so that they can fully report back to the full council in due course, and that is the proper way of doing things in this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, firstly, thank you for your proposed motion, but it's felt to make it effective that the proposed amendment will allow the motion to be considered as part of a wider review of the wider impacts and changes to the way that we operate as a council. So this is along with the noted changes requested in Local Democracy and Elections Act, the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. And we agree that the proposal should be considered, but believe that it should be reviewed as part of that wider review that we've spoken about and reported back to us as members here at full council, having been properly scrutinised by that said Democratic Services Committee. And we feel that not doing so may undermine the democratic structure of the council, as well as understanding the true effectiveness of any proposed changes. So again, thank you for raising, but feel this is the best way to kind of move it to get the best effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roatley, the right to reply, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the right to reply. And I'm not going to go through every debate point that was raised. Some are irrelevant, some are very relevant indeed. I agree with many people who have spoken that the need for the extra 15 minutes would not hamper any progress of the amendment. And it would be nice and it would be democratically a good thing to do if we could have the 15 minutes now. And why should we have that? Because at the moment, Baroness Wilcox quite put to this council that in the future, we will have a more democratic, open and transparent council, which might suggest that we are less than open, transparent and democratic at the moment because of the lack of scrutiny of the leader of the council. Baroness Wilcox again goes on and says there are many other areas that members of the council can hold this administration to scrutiny. And I suppose she's referring to anytime questions, Mr. Mayor. So let me have a go with this one. Anytime questions. On the 2nd of December, I wrote an anytime question which was received by Democratic Services to the Leader of the Council. And it went, Leader of the Council, J. Mudd, the prognosis of Devlin's Friars Walk is grim. In the light of probable closure, can you now disclose what your plan B is? That was on the 2nd of December. I've been chasing it ever since, but not just me. Let's follow this progress through. The head of Law and Standards, he's chased her. Democratic admin, they've chased her. Nearly 2 months later, and we haven't had a question to that question I posed on the 2nd of December. We have constituents in my ward that work at Debenhams. We have constituents in my ward that have lost their jobs. And that her failure...
Does this have to do with the actual amendment?
It certainly does. It was raised by the member. It has everything to do with that. So we follow. We follow.
Hang on, Bill. Councillor Roatley, hang on. Gareth, is Councillor Roatley okay to carry on?
Mr. Mayor, the debate is on the amendment, first of all, and secondly, it's about questions in council. And what Councillor Roatley is referring to at the moment is an answer to a written question, not an oral answer, a question raised in council. So I'm not really sure that it's relevant to either the motion or the amendment.
Thank you, Gareth, for pointing that out. It was only relevant because Baroness Wilcox actually flagged up the point that we have.
Thank you.
Okay. You've gone off, Phil.
We've lost Councillor Roatley.
Yeah.
Okay, well, somebody up there keeps muting me. So there we go. We'll start again. Thank you, Gareth, for that. Can I say that the only reason I referred to it was because Baroness Wilcox, in her support of the amendment, pointed out we have a very good democratic process in any time questions to the leader of the council. And she went on and said that if members were to follow this democratic process.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Can I clarify? And if you look back in the minutes, the records will show. I talked about the other democratic processes in the council. I did not specifically refer to the democratic, about writing in. I was actually supporting Councillor Chris Evans's earlier allusion to the democratic processes in terms of the scrutiny committees, and I applaud the fact that Councillor Evans mentioned that people really need to get a hold and a grip of their brief and ask the appropriate questions at those times. So, you know, I'm sorry, and I'm just very pleased actually that Councillor Routley has referred to me at least half a dozen times. Thank you so much for illuminating what I said earlier in support of this amendment. Diolch yn fawr.
Well,
thank you.
Can I just say that unfortunately this is Newport City Council and not the House of Lords. We don't have access to Hansard here for these meetings. I wish we did indeed. You were...
Mr Mayor, point of order. We might not have access to Hansard.
Mr Mayor, Mr Mayor.
These are the official records. Thank you.
Baroness, please. Thank you. Would you sum up, please, Bill? Please,
thank you, Mr Mayor. I will try to sum up now. I'm sorry about the heckling from behind. It's totally and utterly out of order. We're asking for this amendment not for us, but for progress, for democracy itself. To deny the 15 minutes is a denial of democracy itself. This will not hinder the amendment in any shape or form. It will lead us to be able to say to those who democratically elected us, look, we are trying. We're going to have 15 minutes and we're going to examine everything about the democratic processes. That's all we're doing. We're going ahead of the game here. We are shining a light on the inadequacies of this democratic process in the city of democracy. If you deny this, democracy will come back and deny you one day. Democracy will come back and deny you. I still stand by this motion, and I hope that members will put their party politics to one side, as the leader of the independent party has by supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I so move and encourage people to support.
Thank you, Councillor Routley. The amendment has been moved, seconded and debated. Those in favour, please show for and against.
I think, Mr Mayor, we're going to have to do a roll call on this rather than do it by exception. Okay. So shall we read out the name of each member?
No, excuse me, can I just
indicate how they want to vote?
Mr Mayor, can I want a point of clarity. I think because you're going to probably get members, including myself, that actually agree with the extension of 15 minutes. We'd like to see that in place, but we also agree with Councillor Marshall's amendment that it should go to the Democratic Services Scrutiny Committee. So whilst we agree that we'd love to see the 15-minute extension, which has been suggested by Councillor Routley, I also believe that it should go through we should, you know, go through Democratic Services to sign it off in a right and proper fashion.
Mr Mayor, maybe
do you want to respond on that, Mr Mayor?
Gareth, may I ask you a question?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
What's the procedure there?
Right, I'm just about to say, unfortunately, what you have here are two sort of distinct motions and an amendment. So unless Councillor Marshall or Councillor Routley is prepared to amend either the motion or the amendment to include both of what Councillor Whitehead wants, then in effect what Councillor Whitehead is moving is yet another amendment, which is a composite of the two. It's an extension of 15 minutes and a referral to Democratic Services Committee. Now, at the moment, that is not before the members, unless either Councillor Marshall or Councillor Routley is prepared to amend what they've put before Council to include that.
Mr Mayor, I'm quite happy to amend the 15 minutes and to add Councillor Marshall's amendment to make it one joined up motion. That then will show.
We're dealing with the amendment first, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to interrupt. We're dealing with the amendment first, so it's really a matter for Councillor Marshall as the mover of the amendment, whether he's prepared to alter his amendment.
Councillor Marshall, will you speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From everything I've noted and everything written, I will not be agreeing to that. I'll be staying as put, please. Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshall.
That being the case, Mr. Mayor, then what we're saying is what we'll put to the vote now is Councillor Marshall's amendment, which is simply to refer the matter back to Democratic Services Committee. The wording is set out in the chat box if members wish to refer to that.
Okay, thank you, Gareth.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could be helpful and to curtail what could be a very long night, Conservative Group will support the amendment. Although clearly we would have liked the additional 15 minutes. I put that in the chat box. So I'm sure the Labour Party aren't going to vote against their own amendment. I see little point in going through unless people had concerns about that and wish to raise it now.
Anybody like to raise a point, please?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ferris here. I have tried raising my hands. Apparently I'm underneath a lot of raised hands of Councillor Al Nawami, but nobody seems to have picked up on me here. Speaking as chairman of Democratic Services, we don't have a Democratic Services officer in place. I believe that we're going out advertising for an officer to take that post. So effectively, I see the merit of obviously of it coming before my own scrutiny committee. Of course, I couldn't say that that's not a good idea, but it will mean that this is.
Mr. Mayor, we close the debate on this amendment now. I'm sorry, but you know, Councillor Marshall has summed up. So
yes, can we vote, please?
We put it to the vote now. Now, if Councillor Evans is saying that they are prepared to withdraw the original motion and vote in favour of the amendment, then we don't need to do a roll call. We can do it by exception.
Mr. Mayor, as the mover of the motion, then it's for me to withdraw the motion. Sadly, we will withdraw the motion because we need progress to be made. We only withdraw this motion.
Councillor Rowley's on mute.
Can't hear you, sorry.
Speak up, Bill. Mr. Mayor, it's unfortunate, but democracy is the way it is. I formally will withdraw the motion from the table tonight. It's sad that we have to continue, as Baroness Wilcox said, to operate in not so much of a democratic, open and transparent way.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'm getting very confused with all this. Are we now saying that the motion has been removed and all of it's going to Democratic Services? Because this is rattling on and on and on.
Yeah.
Well,
yes, Mr. Mayor,
hang on, excuse me. Right, can we all stop, please, now? Right, you've agreed to take the amendment off, right, Bill? Can we have
he hasn't.
But not agreed, but to take away his motion then, please. Can we agree to
Mr. Mayor, I have agreed reluctantly because we have to. I mean, this isn't taking the chains of democracy off. This is moving.
Right, okay, that's all we need. That's all we need.
I don't know what
Right, can we all be quiet?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has been withdrawn, so we can just put the amendment to the vote now.
Yes.
Yes, please, if you would, please, thank you.
So can I suggest that then, if everyone's in favour, unless anyone wishes to object or abstain from the motion, could they indicate now? Otherwise, we'll assume everyone is in favour of the amendment that Councillor Marshall moved.
Yes.
So in the absence of any objection, Mr. Mayor, I would take that as passed.
Okay.
So Councillor Marshall's resolution is passed.
Okay, and that becomes substantial motion and is agreed. Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Item 6, Report on Treasury Management 6-monthly report. The leader to present this report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to inform Council of the Treasury management activities for the first half of the year to the 30th of September 2020. It's a backwards-looking report and confirms the Council continues to follow its strategy of maintaining investments to a minimum rather than taking out new long-term borrowing. The report shows in the first half of the year that there has been a reduction in net borrowing from the end of March from 153.8 million to 121.1 million. The main reason for this decrease being the reimbursement of the extra borrowing the Council undertook at the end of March to front fund the business grants at the start of the pandemic, which was subsequently reimbursed. Welsh Government also front-loaded the revenue support grant in the first half of the year, meaning there has been a positive cash flow. As we move into the second half of the year, we anticipate the level of investments will fall to our minimum level, and we may need to undertake more borrowing towards the end of the financial year. The report has been to Audit Committee for noting and comment, and their comments are included within the report for noting and consideration. Overall, the report confirms that the limits and indicators have been met in line with the approved strategies. Therefore, Council are recommended to approve this report.
Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Are there any comments on the proposal? No, okay. Well, would all councillors cast their votes by clicking? Gareth, should we do
again by exception, Mr. Mayor, unless any councillor has any objection, then we'll assume they're voting in favour.
Okay. Therefore, the report is duly approved. Thank you. Item 7, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The leader to present this report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Council Tax Reduction Scheme for 2021-22 updates the scheme that was introduced on the 1st of April 2015. The Council is not required to consult on the proposals of the new scheme, as the changes made are in consequence of amendments made to the prescribed requirements regulations. The local discretions that are available to the Council will remain unchanged. This report provides information on the proposed Council Tax Reduction Scheme. The proposal is set to approve the reduction scheme in accordance with the aforementioned legislation, and therefore the Council are exercising their local discretions as indicated in the report, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder, please?
Yes, second, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any comments on the proposal? Right. Okay, no, thank you. Should we get through as passed, Gareth, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, unless anyone wishes to vote against or abstain, in which case perhaps they can indicate now, then we'll assume that they're all in favour.
No. Therefore, the annual report is duly approved. Thank you. Item 8, Director of Social Services Annual Report. The leader will present the report and ask the Cabinet Member for Social Services, Councillor Cochrane, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to present this report, which has been delayed due to COVID. So just to be clear that this is a look back in terms of some of the work that has been undertaken. I'm pleased to say that the Scrutiny Committee received the full annual report in October, and their comments are also included in the report itself. And I think at that point, Mr. Mayor, what I would like to do is invite the Cabinet Member for Social Services, who would like to second the report, to say a few words on the report. I'd also like to give my thanks to him for all of the positive developments within that service area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Are there any comments on the report?
Can I just say a few words,
Yes, you may,
Mr.
yes.
Mayor, please?
Yes,
Really, I think, first of all, I'd just like to say that we're very fortunate in Newport to have two excellent heads of service in Sally Jenkins and Chris Humphreys. I also like to thank Chris, obviously, for taking the role of interim director during this period of time while we deciding our next sort of step in that direction. But a couple of points I would like to make before I sort of ask Sally and Chris, although it's Chris's report and it is an officer's report. There are a couple of points I think is very pertinent that I think that needs to be drawn out of the report. Although the report is 45, I think, pages long, there are a couple of points I would like to emphasise. One is, and this is a report, as the leader said, between 19 and 20, so it's rather belated, but over adult assessments, there was over 4,000 adult assessments. That's an increase of 22%. On children assessments, 6,000 children assessment, an increase of 15%. Carers assessments were nearly 200 assessments. That's an increase of 71%. And housing support, where we've got social services involved in housing, which I think is a first for us. Well, it's gone for a few years, but it's great to have a social worker involved in housing, because a lot of the issues that some people are experiencing in housing need social services. That's an increase of 10%. And this is no extra staffing in these areas. So I think we really need to put that all in context. I think if you look at the report, some of the issues, the new initiatives that have come through in Reach and Home First, there's over 1,000 residents were prevented from going into hospital through our Home First areas. Reablement is, we offer everyone now a care and a support plan, whether they're involved in hospital or not. They have got that right for an assessment. First Contact Centre, 4,500 citizens now have been contacted, or they got the right to contact the Reablement and First Contact Centre. Community connectors, over 2,000. I think one of the biggest ones that I'm sort of really pleased about is the increase in residential placement opportunities. Now, we're all aware of Rose Cottage when we went down the path of having that, and I think, Mr. Mayor, I think you came on some of the visits really to see some of our investments, what we've done there. We've also got 2 more properties. We were very fortunate to have capital funds from Intermediate Care Fund in Rosedale and Windmill Cottage, and that will deliver another 8 beds. Now, this is something there's envy of all local authorities in Wales, and in fact, Sally and myself and another officer, Louise, unfortunately is no longer with the authority, we went down to the Assembly and made a presentation on how we did this and bringing some of our most vulnerable children back into Newport. Foster carers, that's another plus with us. We increased the rates, and we've had an increase of 6 new foster placements now approved in that period, and obviously we're moving in that direction, and we're going to do a media campaign for that as well. I think the last point I'd like to make before Chris and Sally might want to make some comments on them is that the joint inspection of children protection arrangements in safeguarding. This was a first for us, and Welsh Government asked us to do a pilot for a new inspection arrangements in Wales, and that included police, health, education and social services. So successful was that pilot scheme that the Welsh Government want to roll this out across Wales. So I think if you look at the whole area of the report, there are more greens than reds, and even some of the reds, they're not applicable anymore because they were silly things anyway, and we made those points to the Welsh Government. And I think I'll leave it at that now, because maybe I've said too much really, because I think it is Chris's report as director, so I'm sure Chris might want to add a few points and ready for questions as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane. Thank you.
Chair, did you want me to make some comments?
Yes, if you would.
Yeah, of course.
Please, thank you.
as members will understand, the sort of, just to say the context of this report. The report is an annual report. That's a statutory requirement that we produce an annual report, and that are set out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. So the format and the context is kind of predetermined, just so people understand why it's written as it is. Obviously, as the leader has indicated, this is taking us back to 2019-2020, which feels a very long time ago now for all of us. And as we know, was a year that ended with us moving into the first lockdown in March last year. But nonetheless, even though it was a very challenging year, there's, as the Cabinet member has indicated, there's a lot of very positive things in this report when you sit and read through it. And I think particularly that what comes out at me is the focus we're able to still maintain on preventative services. So from an adult point of view, supporting people through reablement, both in the community and in our intermediate care beds. So to move back home if they've had a stay in hospital. And as was mentioned, our Home First service, which we're the host for the whole of Gwent, sits at the front door of our hospitals. We've now extended it to the Grange Hospital, so that people, if after a medical assessment is determined they don't need to be admitted to hospital, then we support them to return back home again. And we're making stronger links there with colleagues in the ambulance service, because quite a lot of people are transported to hospital following a fall. So we're sort of doing preventative work with those people to make sure that they don't have any subsequent falls, whether that's adapting their home environment or giving them some reablement. So a lot of what we're describing is kind of how we kind of link services together and get them to work more effectively. So our first contact service not only has social workers and occupational therapists, it also has housing support workers. It has people who specialise in working with people with visual impairment, and we are integrating the reablement front door into our front door in adult services as well. I don't know, I think Sally's with us, so she might want to highlight some of the achievements in children's services, of which there are many in the report.
Thank you, Chris Humphreys. Thank you.
Thank
Sally Jenkins. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Chris. Just a couple of things following on from Councillor Cochrane and Chris's comments is obviously, again, this is going back a year. I would like to highlight the joint inspection, because whilst it feels a lifetime ago, it was a very long week, that week in December. But what it did demonstrate was some really strong interagency child protection arrangements for children across Newport. The vast majority of those children are living with their parents and their families. And I think what that inspection and the final report really demonstrated was the ability of children's services working with colleagues in police, health, education, probation and voluntary agencies to work together to protect children and to support them with their families. And picking up on Chris's point, is although many of our achievements are with our looked after children, the vast majority of children we work with remain with their families, and the support that we offer them through our preventative services is crucial. And just to pick up, I mean, in the report, we've highlighted Baby and Me, which is a particular development that we've led on to really support mums very early in their pregnancies who are at risk of some great outcomes for those mums already, which is brilliant news, and that service has continued throughout COVID. I'd also highlight family group conferencing, which has been a priority for Welsh Government, which we've rolled out really successfully across all of children's services, which is bringing family members together to reach solutions. Just to pick up on Councillor Cochrane's point, obviously residential care has been well documented, but in addition, during 1920, we were successful in beginning to recruit increased numbers of foster carers, and that's continued despite COVID. Thankfully, we were able to increase the reward package that we offer to our foster carers right at the end of this period. So those successes in terms of recruitment have very much continued.
And I think, like Councillor Cockram and Chris, I mean, our thanks and our gratitude to Children's Services staff is beyond compare, really, given what they've had to go through over the past year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sally Atkins. Thank you. Councillor David Fowler, please. You wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reading the report, I can see that both services have had an incredible amount of extra pressure upon the services that they provide, and I just wanted to commend really the staff for managing those pressures. It's good that there are now more people willing to be foster parents. That's really, really important, that children who are in care have the best possible start in foster homes. I'm just a little bit concerned as we move now through this year and this pandemic in particular, that pressure again around mental health services will increase. And I think that, or I'm not sure whether there's any sort of plan in place to assist with any extra work that will be required in both services around mental health issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Matthew Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Conservative Group welcome this report and the honest appraisal during an extremely difficult time for all concerned, and will be supporting this. We recognise the pressure they've been put under, and I would like to also take this opportunity to thank all those who have strived to achieve the best possible outcomes for our residents through a time of national crisis. Thankfully and finally, the Welsh Government have recognised some of the performance indicators are not fit for purpose and are making moves to change that, something I recall raising last year and Councillor Cockram has just been mentioning now. There are indeed plenty of areas to be proud of, and of course a number of areas to be improved upon, and as Councillor David Fowler just mentioned, increasing pressure on services such as mental health and domestic abuse as a result of the pandemic. There are some very innovative projects taking place at the moment, and hopefully we will continue to see progress over the coming year as these projects develop. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Are there any more people who wish to, councillors who wish to speak, please?
Could I just come in on one point, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly, Councillor Cockram, yes.
It's just what I wanted to say, really, as well, which I forgot, and I think is such an important point. On our youth justice figures, since December 2018, we haven't had one child sentenced to custody. Now, I think that's been a marvellous sort of a figure, because in the past, obviously, we've had a reconfiguration of youth justice, and the way that team is working now, it just shows, because of the figures we're having now, no child being sentenced to custody. And I forgot to mention that, and I think it's an important point.
Thank you, Councillor Cockram.
Mr. Mayor, just a word off myself, obviously. As others have alluded, I do commend the reports, but I'd also like to thank Councillor Cockram. I've had a few issues that have raised their head, and I have to say I've been able to phone Councillor Cockram and he's responded, and we've always had positive outcomes. So I'd like to thank Councillor Cockram, who plays a very important role in all of this. Cheers, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this this report? No? Thank you. Gareth, I think we'll go to the vote, please.
Yes, unless the leader wants to say anything in response, then we can proceed straight to the vote.
Yes. Leader? Councillor Mike, would you like to speak on this report, please?
Just to extend my thanks to both heads of service and the cabinet member, Mr. Mayor. I think we're making excellent progress in terms of the services that we provide to some of our most vulnerable residents, and I'm really pleased with that, and it's good to hear colleagues recognising that and acknowledging that here today, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mike. Thank you. I think we can go to the vote now, Gareth.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, again, unless anyone wishes to indicate that they they don't want to accept the report, we'll assume by default that everyone approves the receipt of the director's report.
I think we have a full house, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9, Licensing Act 2003, Revised Statement of Licensing Policy. The Cabinet Member for Licensing and Regulation, Councillor Truman, to present this report, please. When the Cabinet Members presented and moved acceptance of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, under the provisions of the Licensing Act 2003, a local authority is required to publish its Licensing Act 2003 policy every 5 years. The revised policy before Council today went out to the public consultation on the 21st of September until the 30th of October 2020. This included a consultation with all responsible authorities, including Gwent Police. The policy was then presented to the Licensing Committee on the 15th of December 2020, whereupon it was agreed by the committee to recommend that full council adopts the draft policy, but with some very minor amendments. The minor amendments expand on the importance for applicants to meet the public nuisance objectives, specifically regarding litter caused by licensed premises, and also to enhance engagement by applicants with local residents and communities when making an application. The Licensing Committee considered the significant impact of COVID-19 on the licensed trade. The committee has requested that the policy changes are monitored and that officers report to them after 3 to 6 months of the new policy being activated. I endorse this particular request. In relation to the policy itself, it remains largely unchanged as it has served the council and the trade well for many years. The main change, however, is the removal of the cumulative impact policy which affected Newport City Centre. Previously, where the licensing authority implemented a cumulative impact policy, CIP, there was a presumption that applications for new premises licences in that area would be refused. The Police and Crime Act of 2018 then amended the Licensing Act and changed the rules. It stated that authorities should only have such restrictions following a cumulative impact assessment. Currently, there is no evidence that the city centre has too many licensed premises and that such an assessment is required. Actually, the reverse is true, and the council would welcome applications from responsible businesses. This would help the regeneration of the area and encourage a mix of visitors to the evening and nighttime economy and improve the variety of premises in the city. The promotion and strict but sensible enforcement of the licensing objectives in Newport, and particularly the city centre, will seek to reduce disorder and nuisance. The city centre will be monitored closely as ever. We are now seeking to adopt a special policy known as the city centre stress area. This allows the authority to make decisions about appropriate opening hours and licensing conditions based on the local needs of the area. This has led us to propose a maximum core hour policy for the city centre. So, for new applications for pubs and bars, there will be a condition that all licensing activity must end no later than 2:30 AM. And for new applications for nightclubs, there will be a condition that alcohol sales must end at 3:30 AM and all licensed premise entertainment will end at 4 AM. Further, patrons of the clubs will not be permitted to entry or re-entry after 2 AM. We feel that these changes strike the right balance between 1, encouraging businesses and improving the variety of the nighttime offer, and 2, the protection of customers and visitors and responsible management of premises. Mr. Mayor, I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Is there a seconder, please?
That will be myself, Councillor Jason Hughes. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jason Hughes. Thank you. Any comments on the report? David Fowler, please, would you speak on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a very sensible and welcome report. I think that anything that helps us bring back a vibrant nighttime economy to the city centre should be welcomed, and that we now have some sensible proposals around closing times and sensible proposals around people re-entering premises after a certain time. Hopefully that will result in us not having scenes like we had in the past, where we've had a car running to revellers on Cambryan Road. So I very much welcome this report, and I hope we can bring back a nighttime economy that resembles the 1980s, when people went into Newport city centre to have a good time and enjoy themselves safely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Mcdad Al-Umami, please. Thank you. Ray, would you turn your camera off, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, can I also, you know, on behalf of the resident in my ward, very much welcome the report. Very much hope we will go back to something resembling sort of the, you know, the vitality that we had in our sort of night economy. You know, it's really quite sad now when you look at it with the COVID and all that, but it's our hope this is just a temporary phase and we will, you know, we will get out of it. Yeah, very much welcome the measures, you know, applying to the city centre and the licensing and the hours. I can remember really what we used to have a battle about this. The residents wanted everything to finish at 1 o'clock, and anything that went to 2 o'clock they were objecting to. But of course then we had sort of the complete deregulation of that, and then sort of we had then what we got used to just before the pandemic. But I see now that this is spelled out in terms of regulation, in terms of protecting the local community as well as the sort of businesses. So very much welcome the report, welcome these measures, and we look forward to seeing a return to a thriving night economy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mcdad Al-Umami, please. Councillor Bill Routley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is indeed a sensible move, and I certainly welcome the control of the nighttime economy in Newport in very much a sensible approach. This definitely isn't a knee-jerk action to any of the problems that we have. It's been very well thought through. And like Councillor Al-Umami and Councillor Fairweather, who have spoken before, I guess that this policy gives clear direction to anybody applying for an application. It gives officers a clear understanding of the rules, and I just think that everybody moving forward will have a greater understanding of the licensing regulations operated for the benefit of business, revellers, and indeed residents in and around these areas. I support this, and I think it's a very good piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Forsey, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to note that some of the suggestions that I put forward as part of the licensing committee review have been included in this report, and the additional points refer to some of the problems that can occur from licensed premises, such as litter, and responsible licence holders should be aware of the impact that they might have on their communities, and they're being asked to take measures to alleviate the problems and to engage with council and community teams in order to, as I say, alleviate some of the problems that they might occur. And licensing is the responsibility of a local authority, and therefore it's appropriate that different licensing times can be awarded in Newport, different to other cities. There's no reason why they should be the same all across the UK. So I think it's important to note that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forty. There are no other names on for the debate. Would all councillors please cast their vote, please? Thank you.
Again, Mr. Mayor, and
Yeah.
unless anyone wishes to vote against the policy, we'll assume that they're voting in favour.
Yes, okay. Therefore, the Standards Committee annual report is duly approved. Thank you.
That's the statement of licensing policy, Mr. Mayor.
Just testing you, I was. Just testing. Sorry about that, but yeah. But it's carried then, okay? Thank you very much. Licensing revised statement of licensing policy. Thank you. Right, item 10, council schedule of meetings. I'm happy to move this report as a guide for the coming year. Is there a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you. About the voting, it's the same scenario. Are there any abstentions? Does anybody want to vote against it or abstain? No? Okay, therefore the Standards Committee annual report is duly approved. Thank you.
That's a schedule of meetings, Mr. Mayor.
Oh man, what have I? Hang on. I saw out the sequence. Sorry, I do apologise. Where am I?
It's been carried anyway, Mr. Mayor. It's just the forward work programme and the schedule of meetings.
Yeah, I did print it all. I do apologise. Yeah, okay. Right. So we go to 10 again, schedule of meetings.
No, item 11, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, 11, okay.
The nominations for mayoralty.
Okay. Item 11, mayoral nomination 2021 to 22. Leader, to introduce this item, please. Thank you, Councillor Mudd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it gives me great delight this evening to move that the long-serving and dedicated ward member for Graig, Councillor David Williams, should be next as Mayor.
Right. Is there a seconder, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to formally second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Are there any comments on the proposal? Please.
Could I say something, Mr. Mayor?
You certainly can, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to accept the nomination this year. I will provide a fuller explanation of why I didn't take up the post last year at the appropriate time. I'd just like to thank Tom really for his efforts in steadying the ship and keeping us, sailing. If that's there's quite a few nautical expressions going to come out now, but keeping the ship sailing on, and really I think that to thank all of you who supported me over the years. Margaret isn't with us this evening, but Margaret was instrumental in first asking me if I wanted to be a councillor. So a lot, I suppose, the responsibility does lie with her. So if next year is not great, we'll know who to blame. But thanks anyway, and we'll just keep sailing on, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you. but all councillors, should we do the same, Gareth? I shall imagine
yes, if no one indicates that they're opposed to it, we'll assume that the nomination is approved unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Then it's duly approved. Thank you. Councillor White, have you any declarations of interest? Personal interest?
We'll note that Councillor Williams has a personal interest in the last item, Mr. Mayor. That's fine.
Yeah, it's on 11, so it's in my no, I've got to read it out. Thank you. Okay, cheers, Gareth. Item 12, questions to the Leader of the Council. We now move to open the questions to the Leader of the Council. Questions will be asked in a ballot list order and sent out earlier today. Before we start, does the Leader have any announcements to make? Thank you, Leader. Jane Mudd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your interesting debate this evening. If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to start my announcements by asking colleagues just to pause and reflect on the situation that we're in across the country as a whole at the moment, where we reached the very, very sad and tragic total of over 100,000 deaths from COVID in the UK. This is a very serious situation, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's really important that at the heart of democracy within this city, we acknowledge that. And we also pay tribute to those who've sadly lost their lives, those who are fighting for their lives, and those who are fortunately there supporting and nursing and treating these patients. So I do think, Mr. Mayor, it's really important that we focus ourselves on this very serious issue and leave behind unnecessary trivia. On the subject of this topic, Mr. Mayor, I am pleased to share with colleagues that Judith Paget, the Chief Executive of the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board, and myself wrote out to every household across the city of Newport with a joint letter to explain to our residents what the process would be in terms of the vaccination programme. This is something that has been repeated in all local authority areas across the whole of Wales. And I should stress, Mr. Mayor, that this programme is led by Public Health Wales and the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board, and we play but a supporting role in this. Nonetheless, the role of the local authority is all important. As I said, every home in the city, every household will have received that letter. I'm pleased to note, I'm pleased to share with you colleagues, that the lockdown is having the desired impact to date, and we are seeing a slowdown in the number of cases across the city. However, this remains a very serious situation. We are doing everything that we can to support our residents and to protect our residents. And I'd just like to highlight that we do have a number of temporary test facilities across the city for our residents. And I would really encourage our residents to access these test facilities. It's really important that people continue to do this. So we've got facilities in Tredegar House car park, there's facilities at Rodney Parade, there's a facility in Hill and in Dyffryn. We've also got facilities in Liswerry and Rogerstone. It is really, really important that people access these facilities. I cannot stress that strongly enough. We have to get to grips with the situation that we're in. On a more positive note, Mr. Mayor, I'm really pleased to share with colleagues that the vaccination programme has started across Gwent, and I'm really pleased that here in Newport we have a central vaccination centre, and I'm particularly delighted to say that certainly many of our citizens across Gwent, not just Newport, have come to that centre and have started to receive their vaccines as part of the vaccination programme. I'm also pleased to state that the vaccination programme is going well in terms of vaccinations to our residents in care homes, and of course our frontline social care staff, who are so essential in this fight against the pandemic. We do have a supporting role to play in terms of these programmes. We have an important supporting role to play in terms of our relationship with our community, and I would appeal to all of our elected members, please do whatever you can to encourage your residents within your communities to take care, to follow the rules, to stay safe, and if they have any symptoms, please access these test facilities. We really need to address this. And on that particular issue, just as a closing point, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give my personal thanks to Gwent Police for the outstanding contribution they've made in recent times in relation to the enforcement of the regulations around this. And there wasn't an opportunity today for me to thank Superintendent Richards in person, but I would like to give my personal thanks to Gwent Police for the support that they've given me as well in relation to this. So thank you, Chief Superintendent Harding and Superintendent Richards. Moving on then, Mr. Mayor, and looking forward, I'd also like to share with colleagues that tomorrow we shall be lighting Civic Centre Clock Tower purple to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day and shine a light in the darkness. Now, we're not able to gather this year for the service at Newport Cathedral, so this is our way as a city of bearing witness to the many victims of genocide. The Holocaust Memorial Trust is live streaming a national service tomorrow evening and asking people to shine their own light in the darkness by putting a light in their windows at 8 p.m. following the conclusion of the service. I really hope, Mr. Mayor, that elected members and residents will do that, because as well as remembering those who've lost their lives or who've had their lives changed forever in the past, we must still challenge the language of hate and intolerance that sadly persists today. Moving on, Mr. Mayor, to my activities as the leader of the City Council, and certainly in terms of my announcements, I'm really pleased to share with colleagues this evening that there has been, as a local authority, we've submitted our consultation responses to the Welsh Government, and thank you colleagues for your participation in that. And these are our responses to the local government bill, which we have discussed here this evening. So I'm really pleased to say that democracy is alive and well here in the heart of Newport, and thank you colleagues for your contribution to that. I've met with the Minister this week, the Minister for Local Government, and we've been through some of the proposals, some of the Welsh Government responses to those consultations, and hopefully this is another step closer, collaboratively, in partnership, local authorities and Welsh governments, into embedding this new legislation. Just as a point of interest, Mr. Mayor, on the subject of democracy, there is no time limit on scrutiny in this City Council. We do have a number of scrutiny committees in place where members are free to challenge all aspects of the work that we do. We also have a system in place where members can submit questions at any time. And certainly I would like to thank the backbench members of this City Council who put so much time and effort into ensuring that we do have effective scrutiny. So thank you colleagues for the time that you put into that. And of course, Mr. Mayor, we also have the questions for the leader, which we're about to go into. Now, on a more positive note, I'm delighted to announce that at the end of last week, the council successfully secured 8.75 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to make our famous Newport Transporter Bridge into a major tourist attraction. This is the third biggest investment that the National Lottery Heritage Fund has ever made in Wales, and it's a tribute to the hard work, determination and commitment of the council team behind the bid. I'd really like to thank the Cabinet member, Councillor Harvey, for this. She's worked so hard on this during this period, and I cannot thank her enough. Our officers, they've made a true team effort and across all service areas to bring this to fruition. And it would be remiss of me at this stage, Mr. Mayor, not to thank the Friends of the Newport Transporter Bridge who've kept this dream alive. They really have kept this dream alive for the city, and what we've secured collectively is a legacy for future generations. So I'd like to give my thanks to that. Now, what will the funding do? It will allow us to repair and preserve this important landmark and open a new visitor centre, which will be linked to the bridge by a walkway. The centre will bring the history of the bridge to life by showcasing the personal stories of those who designed, built and used the bridge. There'll also be more car park spaces for visitors and an exciting activities programme, including theatrical performances, art classes and mindfulness sessions. The restoration of the bridge will include work on the gondola, which will see the reinstatement of a number of its architectural features, as well as improvements to the approach road on the eastern side of the bridge. Refurbishment will also be carried out on the main boom and a number of cables will be replaced. The development of a new visitor centre should create both job and volunteering opportunities and enhance the city's reputation as a visitor destination, both of which will bring wider economic benefits to Newport. I'm sure this wonderful and exciting news is welcomed by members, officers and residents, as well as the bridge's many admirers across the world. Now, Mr. Mayor, since we last met, work has been completed on a new active travel path in Coed Park. The council carried out these improvements after listening to the feedback from the people who use it. Now, this is already established as a well-used walking route, and the path was also identified as a potential off-road cycling route from Riscott Road through to the open space down to Western Avenue. Funding was secured from Welsh Government to implement enhancements to create an active travel route, which resulted in a wider, smoother path that benefits users of all abilities. The construction of the new path surface also incorporated special measures to protect the roots of nearby trees. A particular point to note, Mr. Mayor, is that the low-level lighting installed on the path has been designed to minimise effects on wildlife and the environment. So it's enabled us to travel safely whilst protecting and preserving our environment. And I do hope, Mr. Mayor, that as we move forward with our consultation on active travel, that more of these schemes will come forward that have been co-developed with our citizens. And I think that concludes my announcement.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Right, we've finished the announcements. We have questions to Leader, please. Councillor Matthew Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the Coed Park walkway is indeed a great improvement. So I'd like to thank for that. And clearly we're all very keen. It's had cross-party support throughout the Transporter Bridge. It is an iconic building, and let's hope that's a big success. I'm surprised the Leader of the Council didn't mention anything about Debenhams, but I'm sure that'll come in new time. But I'm glad she did mention about the active travel scheme. As you know, transport emissions in Newport are considerably higher than the Welsh average, and the new Welsh Government recently published its draft strategy called A New Path in English. It has some very admirable aims and objectives, although I've never been a fan of 20-year horizon strategies. I don't think they're worth the paper they're written on. We all know that safe, attractive, well-managed transport infrastructure is a key priority for the council, and we support those aims. I'm sure we would all welcome more people walking and cycling to work, and indeed using public transport or working more from home. But here's the problem. There are lots of sticks and very few carrots. Reappropriation of road space means closing roads in English. The potential introduction of congestion charges and workplace parking charges and other punitive initiatives would have a devastating impact on our city at a time when promoting economic growth must be a top priority. The reality is a lot of their proposals would literally drive businesses away from Newport, not bring them in. As a council, we've always supported an M4 relief road, which would reduce pollution, congestion, and encourage economic development. Do you still support an M4 relief road?
Councillor Jean Mudd, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Evans. So I think for the first point that you raised in relation to the draft strategy, the City Council has recently developed a response, and I'm really pleased to highlight the work that both Cabinet members Jevons and Davis are doing in this in terms of their respective portfolios, the Cabinet Member for City Services and the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Development. On the subject of an M4 relief road, the City Council voted unanimously to support an M4 relief road. The decision by the Welsh Government was not to go forward with an M4 relief road. The Welsh Government decided to go ahead with a review undertaken by the South East Wales Transport Commission. As a City Council, we have now to take a responsible approach in order to address the issues that you've mentioned and move forward into the future. And that responsible approach is to take forward the recommendations of the South East Wales Transport Commission's report. As colleagues will be aware, the City Council has recently entered into a memorandum of understanding with Welsh Government in order to set up a delivery unit which will work on these recommendations. We will do so collaboratively in order to ensure the best possible outcomes for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'm just wondering how they're going to do this, because we all know that some of the initiatives they're moving forward. I mean, the Ebervale to Newport rail link is fantastic news, and it's been a long time coming, and hopefully they'll actually do this as a matter of urgency. But surely we've got to recognise that all the developments which are taking place around the outskirts of Newport, along the M4 corridor, all the businesses, office developments, the reason, the rationale behind the convention centre at the Celtic Manor was on the predication that the M4 relief road was going to be built. The recognition that buses and taxis and public transport also use roads. I mean, surely we've got to be competing with other towns and cities across the UK. It's going to be incredibly difficult. Cars are becoming more environmentally friendly, so we surely need to recognise that. So how are we going to encourage economic development and compete with other towns and cities without an M4 relief road?
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Evans. I think it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of how we look at this. So we could look at it in the context of competition, or we could look at it in the context of collaboration. I prefer to look at it in the context of collaboration. And on the subject of collaboration, I'm really pleased to share with you colleagues that earlier today I attended a discussion forum with other colleagues from both key cities and core cities, leaders across the UK, to talk about exactly that. How can we support economic growth? What is there that we can do as cities? And I'm really pleased to say that there were a number of senior politicians who were present at that meeting. Certainly so, somebody who you may be familiar with, because I understand that one of the representatives there was the deputy chair of your own political party. We had an interesting debate, and what we were able to highlight there as leaders from cities across the UK was how important it was that connectivity formed part of the investment as part of the levelling up agenda. I can't emphasise that strongly enough. If we are to support economic growth and encourage that, then we really do need to look at the levelling up agenda, and we do need to consider that. All of our cities need to do that. Now, as you'll be aware, Newport is one of the cities within the Western Gateway region. One of the priorities of the Western Gateway is exactly that, to improve connectivity within the region. As are the recommendations of the South East Wales Transport Commission's report. We'd all like to see an improvement to connectivity because we all understand the benefits that that can bring to our economy. That's not just a local issue, it's a national issue. On the subject of how will we achieve that, well, at the local level, we will achieve some of those improvements as a local authority because at the local level, we are the road authority. We'll work in collaboration with Welsh Government in order to secure some of this as well. But you mentioned rail, and it would be remiss of me, Councillor Evans, in this discussion, when we're on the topic of rail, to not mention the lamentable, totally lamentable level of investment in rail infrastructure in Wales by the UK government. So I call on the UK government, in the interest of their levelling up agenda, to invest in rail and invest in connectivity within this area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Budd. Thank you. Councillor Kevin Whitehead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's all becoming clear now. That's why a motion was tendered for extending the time limit. I'm going to try and get through this rather quickly because I think it would be a bit rude of me not to let Councillor Carmel Townsend also tender question. We as a group believe now more than ever in working together, respecting each other's views and values, but finding common ground, particularly in the current crisis. Will you first join me in paying tribute to Uskmouth Rotary Club's campaign and getting laptops and devices to the children in need of them? And leading into the question, can the leader tell us how many children in Newport that haven't got access to remote learning, and what are the administration doing to address it? We as a group will do all we can to help, particularly those who are governors. I do have a quick supplementary to this, leader. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Thank you.
sorry, Mr. Mayor. Apologies. I was trying to speed it up. Sorry. Thank you for your question, Councillor Whitehead, and we're all supportive of the Rotary Club's work on this. And I was really pleased, actually, before Christmas, to do an interview with two of the young people who are working on this project, and within that, an appeal to people to come forward, especially. What I actually said to people was we're moving towards Christmas now. People will be going into their attics to get their decorations down. If you're bound to have something up there collecting dust, bring it down, pass it on. This can make a difference in the future. Overall, around about 94% of our pupils have got access to that connectivity at home, with around 95% of them having access to the device to support their home learning. So what we need to do is really focus our efforts immediately on the remainder of those. There's a number of measures that we have put in place to do this. And we've been, as a city council and our schools and also some of the businesses, as you know, the schools have been loaning devices to pupils and families. What we've done is, and I think this is quite important because I recognise the pressure this puts on people in terms of accessing the internet. We've been able to provide a MiFi device which gives access to 4G internet connection, and that's important because when people are pay-as-you-go contracts, it depletes their access, doesn't it? So it's really important that we do that, and we'll continue to roll that out. Obviously, some of those pupils are vulnerable pupils, we know, who may not be getting really positive support from their parents at home, are also invited into schools for face-to-face learning. And we also provide blended learning activities. We've made use of the Welsh Government EdTech Fund to purchase over 3,000 additional devices. We've received 400, and I'm sure other colleagues will be aware that there is, I don't want to say a national shortage, but the geopolitics and issues that have been going on between China and America and the COVID pandemic have actually led to a time delay in terms of the import of machines, but we are expecting more to come. And we are expecting a further 1,300 devices to be received over the next week, and we'll be getting those out to schools as soon as possible.
That's actually an excellent end to your answer. I'm very pleasing on to hear. Just a little one really as regards to supplementary. If we look in the background, we got the Newport cast now with background picture there. I'm mindful that a lot of these children will come from a type of background where they'll be intimidated by showing their rooms and on screen. And I was just wondering if our fantastic IT department would come up with some sort of generic backdrop for them kids, so it'll mitigate that, because we're all a little bit like that, So I just think that would be also a nice touch. But well done on the numbers of the things you've sourced. Thank you, Leader, as always.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Would you like me to respond to the supplementary quickly, Mr. Mayor?
If you would, please, yes, quickly.
Okay. So on that, Councillor Whitehead, I absolutely recognise what you say, and I wouldn't want any of our young people to feel vulnerable. I do know that there is guidance on the hub, and I'm sure as school governors, everybody's got access to the hub. There is guidance on online lessons, and that also gives out the guidance on the use of suitable backgrounds. But we will certainly take this up with our schools, and we'd be happy to distribute or share some of our images of Newport should they wish to use them. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mudd. Carmel Townsend, please. Councillor
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. I think point of order, Mr. Mayor. The 15 minutes allocated time has now expired.
No, it hasn't, Mr. Mayor. There's 1.5 minutes left.
1.5 minutes. Thank you, Gareth. I accept that.
Thank you.
Shall I be very quick then? Leader, can you provide an update on when the new Household Waste and Recycling Centre in Telford Street will open?
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. I don't have that information to hand at the moment, but I'd be really happy to ensure that you get a written response to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
How long we got left, Gareth, please?
Is enough time for the next question to put the question, okay. Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Laura Lacey, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leader, can you provide an update to members on the preparations for Brexit, please?
Oh, okay, Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
Certainly, yes. Yes, Councillor Mudd, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. As colleagues will be aware, the situation has changed somewhat since we last met as a full council, and there is now an agreement of sorts in place. What I would say is that as a city, we've got a long heritage of forging strong business and trade relationships with the world and actually enabling people from the world to live and work in our city. And I think it's quite important that we continue to promote Newport and provide opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses to grow during this period. There has been quite a lot of work done in collaboration with Welsh Government and our multi-agency partners on this particular issue, and there is a thorough risk assessment in place. So in terms of that risk assessment, we are also managing this through Gold. It's monitored constantly, and I'd just like to give all members an assurance that we are monitoring this very, very carefully indeed. The Brexit situation itself and ongoing arrangements for the city are reported to the Cabinet on a monthly basis, and the Brexit is also reported in our corporate risk register. I would like to say particularly that our community cohesion team have been working very closely with our food banks working group and the EUSS working group to support EU citizens, residents and asylum seekers, and to encourage ongoing take-up of EU settled status. And I'd really like to be absolutely clear that we do welcome citizens here in our city of Newport. We welcome people to come and live here and work here and contribute to the economic growth of our city. We've also worked quite closely with Gwent Police and other multi-agency groups to identify any issues of hate crime and discrimination directed at EU citizens and working in the city. And I think it's important to emphasise.
Councillor Mudd, please, the time's up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's no further time, so the councillors who haven't had their answers, please, they'll be getting written information on what they've asked. Okay, thank you.
Well, they'll have to put their questions in writing first, Mr. Mayor. Well,
yes, I understand that. Well, could you put your questions in writing, please, to the leader of the council, please? Thank you. That's Councillor Charles Ferris, Councillor Joan Watkins and Councillor Keith Thomas, please. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I submitted a question to the leader of the council, or I submitted a request. I was accepted into the ballot today, and I'm not showing on the ballot. Can we? I'm sure I would have been first before Laura Lacey on that ballot, maybe. But however, I'm not showing on it, and it was accepted and approved. Can I have an explanation, maybe off Mr. Price?
Gareth, please.
The list are only the top 6 who come out of the ballot, and it alternates between members of the administration and members of the opposition group. So I can only assume that Councillor Ferris and Councillor Watkins came out of the ballot ahead of Councillor Routley. But again, if Councillor Routley wants to put his question to the leader in writing, then he will get a written response.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try again. I'm still waiting 2 months to have my last question answered, but then.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Routley. Item 13, questions to the Cabinet members. There is one written question for the Cabinet members. Question 1, Cabinet member City Services. Councillor Mogford, your question to the Cabinet member, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, could the Cabinet member give an update on the recent flooding emergency in Newport that took so many residents by surprise? In his overall response, could the Cabinet member include a response to the specific questions? What lesson has the Council learnt through this last emergency? What actions are subsequently being taken to avoid repetition of such severe flooding events? What funding or reserves can NCC tap into to improve the resilience of these types of emergencies going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Mogford. Councillor Jevons, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, like many other areas across Wales and the UK over the last few years, Newport did experience sudden and very heavy rainfall and incidences of flooding at Christmas. Such major flooding events are subject to a Section 19 investigation, and those in relation to the recent incidents in Newport have commenced. I'm sure the points that Councillor Mogford refers to in the question already form part of their agenda, and I'm sure they will be discussed as part of the investigation and the findings will be made public in due course. Whilst led by Newport City Council, these also involve other relevant bodies, including NRW and Welsh Water. In terms of infrastructure, the Council's 5-year capital funding programme is set out in the Highway Asset Management Plan, on which members were consulted, but the majority of large-scale flooding defence work is carried out by NRW. It is, however, important to be aware that there will always be a limit to the capacity of drainage systems across the country, and instances such as those recently experienced, which are unfortunately likely to become more common due to climate change. It is likely that the sheer volumes of water will be the key issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Councillor Mogford, have you any supplementary, please?
I do. Could the cabinet member tell us who was in charge of the emergency over the Christmas period? And I think the title for that person is the Gold Commander. And could the cabinet member, on behalf of the ward members of Langstone, pass on our thanks to all the officers who did a great job during that emergency?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shall I reply to that? I can't give you off the top of my head who was Gold Command, Mr. Mayor, but I can give you that certainly in an email as an answer, and I will pass on your thanks from councillors in Langstone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Thank you. Questions to committee chairs committee. We have no written questions to chairs for committees. Okay, that concludes the business set out on the agenda. The date for the next council meeting is Tuesday, March the 3rd. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.